Hello and welcome to today's A-Team Group webinar on proactive RegTech approaches to fighting financial crime. My name's Sarah Underwood. I'm an editor here at A-Team Group and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Our expert speakers today are Lee Ashmore, Global Head of Regulatory Compliance IT, Compliance Analytics and MIIT, and Regional Head of Compliance IT at Asia Pacific at HSBC. Anton Nikai, Compliance Manager at Bank of Ireland, Lauren Schwartz, Senior Director, Capital Markets Regulatory Technology at CIBC Capital Markets, and Sean Hurst, Principal Regulatory Advisor at Smarsh. I'll ask them all to introduce themselves in a moment, but first a few hints and tips for you. To the right of your video, you'll see a Slido panel split into two, one part for polls and one part for questions. We'll be running 3 audience polls today. I'll let you know when they're coming up, so do please vote in those and let us know what you're thinking about the topics we're talking about. And please feel free to put your questions for the speakers in the question panel. Please put them there just whenever you like, and we'll gather them up and answer as many as we can. So please just crack on with that. Okay, enough of me, and let me come back to ask our speakers to introduce themselves. Lee, would you like to go first?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I'm Lee Ashmore, Global Head of Regulatory Compliance IT, Compliance Analytics and MIIT, and Regional Head of Compliance IT for Asia Pacific. And I also gained a new hat this week, and I now look after the KYC technology for HSBC globally as well. Really happy to be here. Really appreciate the invitation.
Thank you. Anton, over to you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Anton Nikai. I work as a compliance manager at Bank of Ireland, overseeing alongside the Chief Compliance Officer, BSA, AML, and sanctions matters, in addition to personal account dealing. In my experience, I've worked in various financial institutions with a focus on both risk and compliance, and in regards to both BAU matters and matters requiring attention and remediation.
Thank you very much. Lauren.
Hello. Thanks for having me on here. I run regulatory technology for CIBC Capital Markets, focusing on a number of different areas, including the AML, KYC, and client lifecycle journey. The trade reporting under things like Dodd-Frank and EMIR and MiFID, as well as trading transaction surveillance on all things or all different use cases, whether they're AML use cases or market abuse and other sorts of surveillance practices. So very happy to be here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sean.
Hi, Sean Hurst, and I work for Smarsh. We're a software company that provides compliance around communications, and I have a 25-year career in fintech. 15 years of that was working for a bank, doing a lot of investigations, especially in the latter part of that side of my career. And then the last 10 years, I've been working for large software companies, helping provide solutions for the other side.
Okay, so we'll be looking at a lot of problems and solutions in this webinar, and we have plenty of expertise in the room. So thank you for all joining us. Let's kick off with an audience poll question. So it is, to what extent has your organization been threatened by financial crime over recent years? And while you answer the question, let me come back to Anton to set the scene and talk a little bit about the nature and extent of global financial crime and how capital markets participants are affected.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you for that. I would like to start with a disclaimer that the views participated in this webinar are my personal views and not associated with the institution that I work for. So when we talk about capital markets, it's important to understand the impact that it has in the financial system as a whole. And part of it is due to the fact that cross-border trades, and by trades, I mean everything in the capital markets as well, has taken a high propensity in the last 10 years. So you have very complex products at the time, very new products that are evolving. You do have the large participations of the market by wholesale participants, but at the same time, many retail investors have entered the marketplace. At the same time, you have a highly liquid market for the most part. And you have vast sums of money that are being moved, through the financial system. while this provides a lot of benefits, to the participants on the market and facilitates trade, it also provides an opportunity for money launderers, which I would say it's fairly unique within the capital markets, because it allows these individuals, or entities, to not only launder illicit kind of really gains in the financial system, but also to make additional profits, by through the capital markets. So the challenge that the market participants, who are for a good part regulated, in both the US, Canada, and the EU, are faced with a challenge, to facilitating trade, and at the same time being able to deter, identify, and then report this activity.
Okay, Lauren, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
So yeah, the question is quite broad and really encompasses a lot of different things that that impact the global markets, especially from a capital markets perspective. So money laundering is certainly, as Anton mentioned, and just before I continue on, I have a similar disclaimer that these are my views and not those of CIBC's. But going back to the question, there are a number of different, I guess, vectors of attack from a financial crime perspective. Money laundering is certainly a very big one, especially in the Canadian market. It's been in the news for a number of years running. There's also, a number of different market manipulation practices, whether that's on price or volume or other means of gaming the system and either reaping extra profits or just manipulating to suit a purpose. Of course, we have things such as insider trading or tax evasion. There's a number of different areas. It's a very broad, number of different kinds of ways that fraud can be perpetrated.
Okay, fine. Well, hopefully we'll find some solutions to those. Could we see the poll results? And Lauren, would you like to comment on that? Is it, whoa, what you might expect? That's a lot of our audience who have been threatened by financial crime. Does that look common?
Yeah, certainly. So I think this is actually quite telling. The amount of money that firms have been investing to combat fraud and to combat AML and all variety of different financial crimes, I think is indicative and it reflects the sentiment here. Wherever there's money, there's an opportunity for financial crime, and banks being at the center of it have to have a very vigilant practice around this.
Okay, thank you for your votes, and thank you, Lauren. And staying with you, how can financial institutions keep track of and anticipate potential financial crime? And as you say, there is so much coming from so many different places and so many types and formats. How can they try and keep track and understand what might happen?
Certainly. So keeping track requires fairly significant investments in technology. Technology is one particular vector that I'm particularly experienced in, but there's a number of different things that need to be done, including staff training, public awareness, and policies and procedures, and just developing a culture of compliance. But from a technology perspective, it comes down to a lot of data, collecting and using data to identify fraud, to ensure that your data is clean and accurate and up to date, whether that's your client data and looking at your risk profiles of your clients on a regular basis, or looking at your trade and transaction data, and making sure that there are no nefarious or signs of nefarious activity. So there's a variety of different things that firms can do to combat this.
Okay. Anton, from a sort of, as I said, from an anticipation perspective, what would you add?
Sure. So I would echo what Lauren said, and I would like to add to the fact that it starts with understanding,
I think we're losing you a little bit, Anton. Can you speak up a bit? Okay, let's move on, and perhaps we'll come back to Anton in a minute.
starting with a risk-based assessment of who your business is and what those opportunities.
Okay, I think we're
Can you hear
losing
me
the
okay, Sarah?
connection. No, you're very on and off.
Okay.
So can you check your connection while I
will.
run the next audience poll, if we may? And this one asks, what are the technology challenges of beating financial crime at your organization? And there's quite not a long, but a longish list. So while you vote, and please feel free to tick as many boxes as are appropriate to your organization, let me bring in Sean to share his views on the technology challenges of this type of crime.
So Lauren makes a great point. It's about the data, right? The sheer amount of data that's been generated. We've seen that increasing nearly exponentially over the last few years. COVID was a big contributor to that. Everyone working from home, suddenly a bunch of new data coming through. Communications data is where we particularly play here at Smarsh, but it's not just that, it's financial data as well, where you really got to have this concern. And now with what happened last year, November, with ChatGPT, with AI models just becoming prolific right now, the amount of data is just going to increase even more. And dealing with that amount of data has always been a challenge. When I worked for a bank almost 10 years ago, the biggest challenges we faced was getting hold of that data, making sure that it was clean and making sure that it was data that was actually useful, right? And then figuring out how to process all that data, whether it is communications content or whether it's transactional data. It's a challenge, both sides. And I think the key thing for people to be aware of, number one, is not fool themselves into thinking that data isn't a problem. But I think the other side of it is just to make sure that they're looking at technologies that can handle not only the data they're dealing with today, but the data they're going to be dealing with over the next year, next 2 years, 5 years.
Okay, fantastic. And who's coming next? I do beg your pardon. Lee, what would you add to that in terms of challenges?
Yeah, so similarly, similar to Sean and Lauren, it's about the data. So first of all, making sure that you've got the right data in the right quality. But also what we're seeing now is that there seems to be a move from regulators in certain jurisdictions to request data to be moved back onshore. So, we've kind of leveraged cloud computing and big data in the past to kind of look at those global networks where you can really identify potential financial crime. But now with, certain jurisdictions pushing to get that data moved back onshore, that's presenting different challenges in terms of being able to get that kind of global view. I think also the fact that the advances in technology that we've had in terms of, cloud computing, AI, blockchain, cryptocurrency, etc. Not only are these fantastic advances for the financial services industry in terms of being able to offer better solutions and products for customers, but these are also really powerful tools for criminals to use as well. And what we do see is that criminals are able to innovate really quickly, often much more quickly than financial institutions. So kind of keeping up with the bad guys is definitely a challenge. And also the fact that, I think as Sean mentioned there about during the COVID times, most markets moved to mostly digital transactions. So people were no longer kind of going into shops and paying in cash or, using their credit card and stuff. People did, mobile banking or ordered online, etc. And making sure that you've got the right tools in place to be able to handle that data that's coming in from different channels, that your systems are tuned to be able to adopt to those changes in behavior as well, is another challenge that we've seen.
Okay, let's see from a technology perspective what our audience says. And perhaps, Sean, you'd like to comment on these results. This is the technology challenges that our audience is facing to beat financial crime. Your views, Sean?
I was on mute. Inadvertently, number one, there is the reason I work for software companies now and not a bank. I was looking to embrace new technologies to help us bring together multiple forms of communication into one place so we can analyze it in one spot rather than the many different silos of information. And that was a challenge we faced. We didn't have a tool that was able to bring all that data into one place. So the data silos, they create delays, they create inaccuracy of data, gaps in your data, and it really is a challenge. And I see things haven't really moved on too much because that's the biggest response here. Shortage of technology skills in the space. I'm surprised a little bit there, but also not. I think we're moving into it's kind of a renaissance of technology now with everything going on with AI. I think it's creating a new buzz and excitement. So a lot of people are moving into that field. And I think that shortage of technology skills is going to be removed over the next few years. But I'm interested to hear what practitioners are actually seeing. Does this relate to what they're seeing?
Okay, that's great. I'll hold you to that one. We'll be asking you that in a few years about skill shortages. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much indeed, Sean. And coming back to you, Lauren, we've talked about this a little bit, but can you package it up? What proactive approaches can financial institutions take to fight financial crime?
Sure, I'll give it a shot. That's a very big question. So I think it starts with the business policies and practices and processes, even before it does with the technology. So just ensuring that we review our risk policies on a regular basis, reviewing our risk profiles on a regular basis. Continuous KYC has been a hot button topic in amongst the RegTech folks. It's a very big challenge. It's hard to do, but we all see the value in being able to do it. But that really then comes into the technology front. We can't do these things at the scale that we need to do them without effective technologies and the new technologies that are out there, whether that's advanced data warehousing solutions, real-time streaming analytics, and other tools and technologies like AI and ML, which we're all now a lot more familiar with than we were a few years ago. And then it comes down to the people. So to the point that was made, yes, there's definitely a shortage of qualified people. It will ameliorate itself over say, I'm going to say a little bit longer, like a 5 to 10 year period. I think it takes more time than that to scale the number of people that we need. And it's not to say that there aren't people, it's just that there aren't enough of them. There's a lot of data, a lot of challenges. So it's going to take more time to get more folks ramped up on the tools and technologies and really innovating in the space.
Okay, thank you, Sean. What would you add in terms of
So I'll go by some of my experience in this space. Again, we're talking a few years back, but I don't think things have changed too much. I think the challenges got bigger. I was involved in quite a few anti-money laundering investigations, some very interesting ones, and some of the tools we'd be using, things like link analysis, we'd be using specific tools like that. But again, dealing with 40,000, 50,000 transactions back then was a challenge to try and perform this link analysis on the data. Doing that now today with 1 million transactions, that's a massive challenge. So things like that are going to be difficult. But I think it all does come down to scale. Just like Lauren said, it's about being able to scale up to be able to do these investigations. When we would do it, it would be very targeted on a specific instance. But what we need today is a wholesale view at financial crime, whether it's internal, whether it's external, right? And to do that, you need to be able to scale not only with the data, but also with the technology. I think things like large language models and the AI that's coming out today is definitely helping us along that route. The ability to do the data analysis and pattern recognition on these massive data sets, it's it's opened up the gateways. That's the whole point of what ChatGPT did. It's not because it's a fun tool that can do some cool stuff. It's that T part, right? The transformer that has really changed everything. And I think we're going to see so much happening around that in the investigation space and many other areas as well.
Okay, excellent. Let's segue into talking to Lee, if we may. And Lee, could you tell us a bit more about what kinds of RegTech techniques and technologies and solutions are useful here? Obviously, we've mentioned AI, ML. Do you see them coming in anytime soon? And are there any other kind of RegTech solutions that are useful?
Sure, yeah. Well, AI and ML in this space has been around for a few years now, actually. So we've certainly been using it for a few years. And you know, as Sean and Lauren said, the problem is the scale of data. So, you know, in HSBC, we deal with hundreds of millions of transactions regularly. And so, you know, we deal with huge volume of transactions. So for us, the ability to be able to kind of really pinpoint where the crime is, where the risk is key. So we've been using AI machine learning to be able to filter through the noise, identify the risk, so that we can focus resources on the right areas as much as we can. We've been leveraging the use of AI ML for detection of anomalies even. So not just kind of filtering through noise post detection, but actually identifying potential financial crime based on, you know, what we've seen in the past. We've also got some really good tools that really help our investigations teams. So things such as a social network analytics tool, which enables you to be able to kind of build the networks using certain data points, is a really powerful tool. So we've been able to identify kind of major crime rings through these tools that, you know, would be extremely difficult to spot using kind of standard, you know, tools and procedures. Of course, it's cloud computing and the big data boom that's enabled that to be possible. Because if you've not got the ability to be able to put that data on an elastic infrastructure, and then it can be incredibly expensive and prohibitive actually for a lot of organizations to be able to kind of get hold of that data. In terms of generative AI, so this is all the rage right now. So, you know, everybody is looking at this and we're no different. As it stands at the moment, we've got a lot of really kind of exciting use cases on this, more in terms of kind of internal facing. So being able to kind of query policy, summarize policies, more advisory services. There's also potential for writing investigations, etc., summarization, to kind of help reduce manual effort. So as I said, your key resources can be focused on kind of higher value tasks.
Okay, Sean, you mentioned AI. Anything else that you'd like to add here?
Yeah, so one of the use cases that I think is going to be something that people will embrace, which goes back to our earlier point of lack of staff or skilled staff to be able to deal with this, using LLMs or these chat models that we have to create simulations of financial crime. You know, if you can create these realistic scenarios where you can train your staff on them, that's fantastic. You know, it's always a challenge. You can look at old cases and things like that, but oftentimes they are old cases. They're not necessarily what the latest and greatest is in terms of, you know, what the criminals are doing. So by using these large language models, you can simulate an entire situation that allows you to do some training on it. And I think that's going to be quite useful. And I think we've mentioned this a few times throughout this, is training is key, right? Training.
Okay, fantastic. Anton, let me bring you back in to talk about how these solutions can also help FIs meet regulatory obligations such as anti-money laundering and KYC. We've mentioned those. How do these tools help there?
Sure. So there's been a focus, you know, like in general in the financial institutions, including capital markets, to integrate RegTech, you know, like into making sure that the AML requirements are kind of really met. Some of these, you know, for example, in the US would relate to the KYC, you know, including with the CIP and beneficial owner rule obligations. but then also furthermore in the transaction monitoring space. So there's been a decent amount of vendors and solutions on the RegTech space that have entered, I would say with various success, the space to assist in challenges, for example, in dispositioning digital workers, like in the space of sanctions hits and kind of really PEP hits, to some degree in the transaction monitoring space as well, where there's been some fear that potentially this would take jobs, from the humans. The experience so far and the sentiment, I think, is that these are kind of really working alongside kind of really humans, and with constant human input, where decisions are kind of really being evaluated and kind of really reviewed in order to kind of make sure that these are accurate and they correspond to policies and procedures in place, So I would say while there is a decent amount of solutions, not all of the solutions would be fit for purpose, So I think it's important that, I guess, market participants, like in risk and compliance, review these solutions to see if they're fit for purpose, in the institutions.
Okay. Lee, what would you add there? Is there something, these solutions you can use to fight crime and to manage AML, KYC, those kinds of things?
Yeah, so I mean, to be honest, by the nature, a lot of these tools help FIs meet their regulatory obligations. And I mean, God, there's lots of examples, but a key area is things like in KYC. So as we mentioned earlier, the move, during COVID, the move to people using mobile banking led to a kind of explosion of digital onboarding systems. So, you no longer needed to go into your bank branch to be able to open an account. You could just kind of take a selfie on your phone and a picture of your passport or your ID card and things like that. So those kind of solutions have been really exciting, I think, over the last few years. They've really developed a lot and really kind of helped the customer experience and smooth that onboarding experience. A new development, which I think it might have been Lauren touched on earlier, is around what we call perpetual KYC as well. So this is no longer kind of your traditional, perform a review every year or something like that. It's event based. So has something happened in the customer's activity that means that we should review their KYC profile? So, for example, if I'm a customer, I've opened an account and I tell the bank that my income is $100,000 a year, but suddenly I'm transacting $100,000 a month, then that's worthy of further investigation and not waiting a year or so to do that. So making sure that we have a kind of more proactive approach to KYC, which helps manage the risk. It also presents potential revenue generation opportunities as well, because it could be that I've suddenly landed an amazing new job which has increased my income massively, and therefore the bank could offer other products to me. So things like that. I also mentioned again around social network analysis tools. These really help in terms of once customers are already in the FI, kind of identifying whether they're really doing what they said they would, whether they're transacting with the people that they said they would, and they're not, they're not kind of getting involved in any potential sanctions exposure, for example. And that kind of helps make sure that we're managing the risk of those customers that are already in there. That's just a few, but I could go on.
Okay, I'm going to stay with you then. And can you please describe a use case of RegTech identifying repelling threats of a financial crime? Can you give us a sort of a potted case study?
Yeah, so I've got some good ones here. I just need to be careful about what I'm allowed to say and what I can't say. We've got a few. So we've got a new AI solution that we use for transaction monitoring, which we've had very good results with. So we've seen that our SAR conversion ratio has increased quite a lot using this tool and identified potential financial crime. But we also have a very good RegTech solution, which I know several FIs use, which is a social network analysis tool. And I've seen some great examples of where this tool has helped identify what looks like a kind of, ordinary customer, and help us to link them to things like, Mexican drug cartels or Russian military organizations. The power of this tool is phenomenal, that if we didn't have it within the organization, I think it would have been incredibly difficult to be able to identify this type of crime that's there. So it's, we've had some great success in kind of identifying and repelling threats of financial crime using RegTech solutions.
Okay, thank you. Lauren, would you like to provide an example?
Sure. And look, we've talked about a lot of different examples already around use cases for technology for financial crime. One in particular that I think is definitely going to be an emerging thing is around monitoring and surveillance, and specifically around being now with, as Sean mentioned, with transformer technologies and LLMs, being able to actually marry language information with financial information and trade and transaction information is going to be a very powerful tool to combat financial crime. It's something that's been highly elusive for a long time. Being able to take, whether it's written or verbal data, and then translate it and being able to map it against trade and transaction data or client data, it's been a very big challenge. And I think it'll continue to be a big challenge, but it will definitely be something that LLMs and other techniques are going to be able to break down those kind of technical silos.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Let's take a break for some audience questions here, and there's quite general ones. I'll ask you all if you could help on this one. It says, please would the panel suggest any organizations that are helpful in fighting financial crime? Are there organizations that can provide advice to FIs at all that you can think of? We'll come back to it if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, I mean,
Sure, Sean, you go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I'm biased. Come chat with Smarsh. We've got lots of options for you, but I'd rather other people answered.
So Sarah, if I may add, so I would say, taking the bias aside, right? So definitely technology companies could provide solution, but I would say also regulators kind of really have started to get into the game of the RegTech, right? And intergovernmental organizations, including the IMF. So, for example, in a case study perspective, they actually assisted, countries like Latvia and Estonia to kind of really monitor money flows, for example. And also in regards to organizations that kind of really provide some kind of really guidance and framework, FATF, continues to kind of really stay and kind of really keep a focus on capital markets as well. But also regulators in the US, like the SEC, for example, they kind of really highlight, kind of really trends and kind of really focuses and things that kind of really they are looking into. And just as much as the financial institution look at RegTech developments, the regulators also do kind of really look into these, and once they see certain institutions using certain RegTech solutions, they kind of really look for similarities, like in other institutions, and see if they are applying, technologies that are available out there.
Excellent.
Sorry, I'll just jump in there just for a sec. You missed out the FCA, and I understand why. For a long time, I've always thought of the FCA as being a bit backwards in terms of coming forward, but in the last couple of years they really have stepped up, and the way that they're approaching technology and also just giving advice to us as practitioners as well as the vendors has been a lot more forthcoming. They're providing things like sandbox environments for technology, AI sandboxes now as well, and they are being a bit more forward with giving actual advice, which has in the past been maybe a little bit lacking. So yeah, the FCA definitely, I think, are another good source.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Lauren, from a practitioner's point of view, let me come to you with this one. It says, is it possible to outsource all or some of the work to identify and avert attacks? I'm sure a lot of banks probably wouldn't, but is it possible to do that? If you don't have the skills, the resources, the tech that you need?
Is it possible? I mean, lots of things are possible. I would advise, my personal view, I would advise outsourcing all of it. You still very much need an oversight function. Even if you are going to outsource even any part of it, you still own, as an organization, as a financial institution, you still own the obligation to maintain regulatory compliance and to just do the right thing. So yes, it's possible. It's very difficult to do all of it externally. But I don't know if it's necessarily the direction firms want to go with. Retaining some control is a key part of this as well.
Okay, that's great. Anybody else want to comment on that one?
So I would like to echo the fact that we are still responsible, like as in the capital market side or as a financial institution, we are still responsible for the end result, right? So that there is no excuse on reliance, so meaning like you can still outsource it, but, you cannot necessarily rely on somebody else to do the job for you, so strong quality assurance processes and compliance monitoring, are very important to make sure that everything is being done accordingly and there is no gaps.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much indeed. And again, to you, Lee, as a practitioner, we've talked about different types, different rules, different tools, all sorts of things. So this one is large, but if you can encapsulate some of it, that'd be great. It asks, how do you implement new approaches and technologies to combat money laundering? Obviously, people are very different stages here. And we've talked about the large scale required. What kind of journey are you on? What steps do you need to take?
Whoa, okay, so where do I start? First and foremost, it's all about the data, right? So, most kind of KYC transaction monitoring systems are garbage in, garbage out, quite frankly. So if you're not getting the right data, it's not of sufficient quality, then no system, no RegTech solution is going to perform miracles for you, quite frankly. And if you are using AI machine learning, then you're not going to get good results, right? It's really important to get good data. I think it's also about kind of understanding the organization's risk appetite as well. So, what are the types of risk that you're really looking to mitigate? What are the best tools to mitigate that risk as well? Because there are a lot of tools out there, and some of them are better than others for different use cases. So there was one of the questions earlier was around kind of the large number of systems available, and that is a problem because we've seen that there are some of the vendor solutions out there that work really well for a particular use case, like trade surveillance, for example, maybe not so well for AML transaction monitoring for correspondent banking, for example. So it's about kind of really understanding a use case and your organization's kind of risk appetite and kind of trying to make sure that you've got the right solution in place. Also understand that it's a journey as well. You're probably not going to get it 100% right first time. So that there'll be an element of kind of having to go back and continuously improve as you kind of get the feedback from the results of your implementation.
Okay, great. Thank you very much indeed. Anybody else want to add to that one? It's a rather very broad question, but any particular points and steps people should take with that?
Sure. So Sarah, I would like to add that when we talk about technology solutions, like you could also, once you decide to make an implementation, you cannot just kind of really set it and kind of really let it work and then, you don't monitor. So you have to stay on top of it, monitor that it's kind of really fit for the purpose of what is being put together. And then also that it is adjusted accordingly, due to whether market conditions or regulations or changes in policies and procedures, and it's really important to make sure that, again, the system, it's kind of really fit for purpose.
Okay, fine. Sean, one for you with your smart hat on or not, and with your crystal ball or not. And it asks, this is an expensive business. Can the panel recommend any approaches to future-proofing protection against financial crime? I guess they're saying if we put the money in now, will we be okay in future? I mean, the bland answer is no, but how well can people do this?
I don't think future-proof is a swear word really in our industry. There is no future-proofing. Traditionally, criminals tend to be ahead of the curve. We're very reactive. Part of that is because people don't want to invest in things that might happen, right? It's a lot of money to spend. But what you can do is just follow best practices, speak to your colleagues, join events like this, try and get involved with other banks, other colleagues outside of the bank maybe that you're in, or financial institution that you're in, and just see what is best practice. There's always something to learn. I'm sure, as accomplished as Lee is, there's always something, and he's going to be learning, and he's always going to be open to it, which is why he's in the business, right? And I think that's just the same thing. Just be open to what is out there. There's no easy answer to that. Also, assessing vendors. Yes, I work for a vendor, but just go out there, speak to as many as you can, right? Because they're all going to have some advice. We live and breathe this, whether it's someone like myself or someone from another company, they're going to have some insights for you, and it doesn't cost you anything to go and chat with them. So I would recommend that.
Okay, great. Lee, coming back to you about something you mentioned, and I think it says KYC solutions, I think means continuous KYC, and just asks, do these KYC solutions diminish the effectiveness of the process?
Not sure I really understand that
I think
question,
the
to be
question
honest
says,
with you.
does continuous KYC diminish the effect of KYC?
I don't think so, no, because it's enhancing the process, right? So I think one of the problems with KYC right now is that it tends to be done when a customer is first onboarded, and then it will be a review at a set point in time. So that might be once a year for your high risk customers, maybe once every 2 years for medium risk, et cetera, et cetera. And what the perpetual KYC is doing is making that much more of an event-based process. So it's automating a lot of this. So for example, as I mentioned earlier, if suddenly my transactional behavior changed massively, then that could trigger a review. That might just mean that it goes to a relationship manager who looks at it and thinks, well, actually, this is not suspicious behavior. It looks like Lee's won the lottery. So maybe I need to go and talk to him and see if I can help him invest that money. So as I said, it's a potential revenue generation opportunity as well as helping you with your, fighting financial crime risk, because it could be that I've suddenly been given a lot of money to launder by a drug cartel, and this is just flagging it much more quickly than it maybe would otherwise. Now, do processes need to change as a result of that? Yeah, I'm sure they do, but those processes should already be in place. They're just getting triggered at different points in time.
Okay, and one more for you, Sean. Again, it's a very open question. It says, we are a relatively small financial firm. How best can we protect ourselves? I guess one of the issues is manual versus new solutions and things like that. Do you work with small firms and help them?
We do, on the whole. Traditionally here in the UK, just down to data residency issues, we mainly deal with large corporates, so large enterprise, but we still, globally, we deal with a lot of small organizations as well. And there's no one size fits all, but there are a lot of solutions that will fit the specific scenario that you have. From our perspective, we're a communications archiving specialist, which provides surveillance and things like that. And you don't have to go into the biggest and best product to fit a situation where you have 10 staff maybe that need to be monitored, right? It just wouldn't make any financial sense. But there are other solutions that allow you to actually provide those actions. So you don't have to go and spend a lot of money to do it. What I would recommend, if you are a small organization, limit the amount of systems that you have, like systems that are generating potential risk. Limit the amount of that, because you want to limit the number of silos again. Because if you have everything in one place, it's going to be a lot easier to sift through that data and actually provide some intelligence and analytics against it. Large organizations, no matter how much you tell them not to silo their data, they still will have siloed data. It's just way too complex. So there are some advantages of being a small organization. You can be more agile. You can choose the solutions that fit you more bespoke, rather than an oversized coat that does the job, but it's not ideal. Right. So that's only advice. I can't really give any direct advice. We're happy to talk to small organizations. We talk to them all the time. We service thousands of them as well. But yeah, I think that's my advice.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. Let's move on for now. So a big thank you to our audience for your questions, and of course to our speakers for your answers. I think we have time to run a final poll, and the question is, beyond compliance, what extent of business and operational benefits do you gain or expect to gain from getting the RegTech response to financial crime right? That sounds like a long question, but you'll be able to see it on your screen. Please tick as many of the boxes as you like on the options for that. And again, let me come back to Sean to talk about how he sees the business and operational benefits of the RegTech response, obviously beyond compliance.
So Lee's mentioned a couple of times about revenue generation, and that is kind of the holy grail from compliance software, because we're traditionally seen as a tax. But if you are able to transform that into something that is useful, then you're suddenly in a situation where, wait, this isn't an enabler, this is a revenue generator. So, there are opportunities for that, like Lee's already mentioned with the KYC thing. Missed buy opportunities. If you're monitoring all your communications and you're able to quickly get insight and analysis into it, you could figure out whether maybe a trader missed a buy signal within a communication that they had with a client. It could be a phone call, it could be an email, it could be a direct message, and they might have missed something. So this would flag it up. You could use some AI, some intelligence that's going to enable you to do that. It's the sort of thing that we're working on. One of the key things, and the more simplistic thing, is it's an enabler for new technologies. A lot of people are considering using Copilot right now, but as with most things with banks, the initial answer is no chance. We're not doing that. Let's see how we can do this in a compliant way. Now, if you're speaking to a company like Smarsh, we're able to provide you a way to be compliant and use these new technologies, which are just going to create so much usefulness for yourselves and productivity benefits. If we're able to provide that again, you're using a compliance solution to enable these new technologies. So it might be a bit of a roundabout way there. But I think definitely the revenue generating, that's from our perspective, also from the bank's perspective, that's really what they want to be seeing, right?
Okay. Anton, as a practitioner, how do you see the business and operational gains of getting this right?
Sure. So I would like to take kind of really the opposite approach versus the revenue generation side. I would say money saved is money earned, and there is a lot of really generated, by having better management of the reputational risk, of the fraud risk, of the operational risk by the implementation of these new RegTech solutions, better cyber risk management and market risk as well, in addition to conduct risk. And I would say by using RegTech solutions, there is an increase of the efficiency and the effectiveness of the processes across the board. And it's better real-time monitoring, and then also better reporting in terms of what's going on at the firm.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. And could we see the results? And Lee, you brought this one up earlier. So how does that look to you?
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, we also, just to add on there, we also see kind of operational benefits in terms of reducing the impact on operations resources. So, less alerts, higher quality alerts, things like that. So that can actually bring big benefits as well. So yeah, there's certainly significant business benefits that can be gained.
Okay. Anybody else like to comment on that one? Nope. Okay, let's move on. And we come to my final question. And I'd like to ask our speakers, all our speakers, to offer some advice to practitioners working to protect their organization from financial crime. Coming back to you, Lee, would you like to kick off here?
Right. So the three things that I've got down here, and this was a tough one, was first of all, understand the problem statement and use case before deciding on a solution. I think sometimes it's all too easy to get attracted to the nice shiny toy and think about ways that you're going to implement that to solve a problem. The right thing to do is think about the problem that needs to be solved first of all, and then go and choose the right solution to be able to solve that problem. Secondly, I mentioned earlier, take a risk-based approach. As much as we would love to be able to find all the financial crime in the world, we have to accept the reality that we are not going to be able to find everything, right? So it's really about making sure that you understand your risk appetite, and you are focusing on the best possible ways to be able to mitigate the risk to your organization in accordance to that risk appetite. That's key. And the last one I put down was make sure that the end-to-end customer experience is considered when you're implementing a solution. I think that, obviously it's really important that we kind of strengthen our systems and our organizations to fight financial crime, but it can't be at the expense of the customer experience, right? We need to make sure that customers are able to do business smoothly and in a satisfactory way. So those are the three things that I've got down.
Thank you. Lauren, what would you like to advise?
So yeah, I've got a few I guess words of advice here, and that first, it starts off with as Lee kind of mentioned, in terms of understanding the size of the problem here. It's a very large problem, so we need to take a very agile and iterative approach to solving these things. We inevitably learn from each implementation, and if you try to tackle the whole thing in one shot, you're bound to get bogged down, and you're not going to achieve the kind of vision that you had originally set out. So achieving it through agile, iterative cycles of constantly learning and adapting, just as the criminals adapt and innovate, we need to as well. At the same time, and this is really difficult when you're taking an agile and iterative approach, is to also be thinking about the future and about scale and about what does the future look like. So keeping those two opposing views in mind at the same time and through the implementation is a very big challenge, but it's something that's necessary. You need to build for today, but also build for tomorrow, and move in small increments, but move to a much larger kind of view of what the world's going to look like. So there's a number of things that you need to keep in mind, and just continue to experiment and just discuss what's going on in the environment. So,
okay, thank you very much. And Anton, what would you say to our practitioners?
Sure. So I've noted a few things here as well. So make sure that your AML program kind of really reflects your business, and that the AML program kind of really makes sense. So the risk assessment should drive the policy. So we go back to the risk-based assessment, and kind of really making sure that kind of the residual risk, in the business is identified, and to the extent possible, kind of really mitigated. In addition to that, I would say based on that, make sure you have a clear technology kind of really plan, and make sure that you are resolving any challenges related to both, like anti-market abuse as relating to the capital markets, but then also with a focus on the money laundering related to that. Make sure that implementation of the existing these technology solutions. I would say the last piece of advice would be stay on top of the regulatory events and both the regulatory guidance and then enforcement actions that are happening in the market. For example, SEC most recently just announced that part of their 2024 enforcement plan, like the AML and crypto, it's going to be pretty much on their radar. And then processes like CDD, SAR, and sanctions, would be also in their priorities. So I would say, to the extent you can, be proactive and try to identify, where risk exists on the business and mitigate against it.
Thank you very much indeed. And Sean, some final advice for our audience, please.
So number one, don't underestimate the amount of data that's going to be created over the next few years. It's going to be bigger than you think. With the generative AI, with what's coming with Copilot, with Zoom's artificial intelligence, with a lot of these other things, the amount of content that's going to be created is going to be, I think, outside the boundaries of what any of the estimates are looking like right now. So don't underestimate that. Number two, alongside with number one, make sure whatever platform you're deciding on using, like we're a unstructured data platform, so it's communications and chats and phone and that sort of thing. Make sure whatever platform you're going with can scale, right? If you're going to be investing a lot of money, which these systems are not cheap, if you're going to be investing that money, make sure you're investing in a system that is able to scale. And then thirdly, if you want to know any more, just come chat with us at smarsh.com.
Okay, and I'll just add one that I've heard throughout the webinar, and that's keep on with the training within your organization so everybody's always up to speed on what's happening and what they can do. That's great. Excellent. Thank you, Sean, and thank you to all our speakers for sharing their expertise and experience on what is, and I think will always be, a big problem, but does need to be challenged on a constant basis. Thank you too to Smarsh for sponsoring today's webinar. Before we close, just a few A-Team group webinars that may be of interest to you. Actually, they're not all webinars, but the first one is on the 7th of November, we'll be hosting a webinar looking at the potential and pitfalls of large language models and generative AI apps, which we've talked about a fair amount today and are obviously very interesting in our market. Then on the, you can sign up to join our 16th of November RegTech Summit in New York. That's coming up next month. The agenda's up already, so do have a look. Some great speakers going to be there, and if you happen to be in New York at the time, please join us. And you can also download the first edition of our regulatory reporting handbook, which is essentially a guide to reporting obligations for FIs on a global basis. There's a lot in there, and hopefully that will be useful to your job. Don't read it, but you can look things up as you need. That said, that's it for today. So thank you again to Lauren, Lee, Anton, and Sean, and thank you to all of you who have taken part in the webinar. Please complete our feedback form, as we're always keen to hear your views and improve our products. Meantime, thanks again and goodbye.